55 years ago, Ben Benjamin photographed the first nuclear explosion. He tells us the story in his own words.
He said, "Don't say anything to anybody, but here's where you're going." And he showed me my travel orders. And it said I was going to Lamy, New Mexico and vicinity. So I went away and scrounged around and found a map of New Mexico. And of course, Lamy, New Mexico wasn't such a tiny place. It wasn't even on the map. I was the only person to get off the train at Lamy. A black Buick came down. So I got in, and these guys, turns out, were GI soldiers like myself, except they were in civilian clothes. They said, "See that mountain?" So that's where we're going. They said, "And we live up there." And they said, "We live behind a fence, and we get out to do tasks like this." He said, "We are inside the first fence." He said, "When you go behind the second fence," he said, "we take some people in there." He said, "We never see those people again." He said, "Very seldom do they ever get out of there." He said, "But you're going behind the third fence."
In 1944, when Ben Benjamin was a 21-year-old private, the U.S. Army sent him to Los Alamos, New Mexico, where a group of scientists was building the first atomic bomb.
"Well, we've got a job for you." And he said, "I can't tell you very much about it. All I can tell you is you'll be working in optics."
After Benjamin arrived in Los Alamos, he was briefed by his supervisor, Dr. Julian Mack, a University of Wisconsin professor of physics.
It said, "We're building a weapon here that if it goes as we hope it will, it will be important in ending the war."
Benjamin was soon put to work on the photographic preparations for the Trinity experiment, the test of the first atomic bomb.
All the cameras we could find, because nobody knew how bright this explosion was going to be. It was the first in the world, a nuclear explosion, and nobody knew how big it was going to be. Was it going to be equivalent to 100 tons of high explosives, or was it going to fizzle and be just a tiny explosion, or was it going to be big? I didn't know it at that time, but the physicists among themselves were making bets on how big this explosion would be. And there was hardly anyone who thought it would go at 20,000 tons of TNT. That's me right there with the campaign hat. And I think I got my picture taken more than the other guys down at Trinity, because the guy doing the documentary photography liked my hat. At the time, we were down there several months before the event, getting the cameras set up, and we had approximately 100 cameras, most of them motion picture cameras. We had 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter motion picture cameras. And then we had still cameras, and we had tracking cameras on a tracking mount, so people knew there was going to be as in any big explosion, there would be a ball of fire that would rise.
For the Trinity event, Benjamin stood on top of a bunker 6 miles west of Ground Zero to operate cameras.
People were shaking a little as the countdown proceeded, and that was a dramatic moment I'll never forget.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now.
Incredibly bright and big, and there was noise of the cameras operating, but I said to Julian, my boss, I said, "My God, it's beautiful." And Julian came right back and said, "No, it's terrible." And that gave me a little pause. I was elated, and Julian was too, but he was thinking of the implications of this huge bomb that would change the world forever, which is what it did. But the other thing that happened is I turned all 4 cameras on, and hadn't paid any attention to the switches, but I looked down and I saw that the insulation on the wires to this switch box were on fire. And I said, "Julian, we got to turn it off. It's the junction box burning." He says, "The cameras are still going. Let it run." He says, "If it's
Within hours of the explosion, teams at Trinity went in on re-entry. Benjamin was part of the team that retrieved film from 4 high-speed cameras 800 yards from Ground Zero.
That's me all suited up with booties and all the stuff you need when you went into a radiation area where you might get radioactive dust on your clothing. We got there and we had a lot of trouble. The shock wave had at least damaged this steel and lead case that we had the cameras in. We had trouble getting the back door off of this thing. We had to go to the vehicle and get the tire irons. We struggled around with that thing for quite a while, but the health safety guy, the guy with the Geiger counter, sitting there, and he said, "Boy, it's hot in here, you guys. Hurry up, we got to get out of here." And we said, "Just a minute, we haven't got it yet." Finally got the sled out with the 4 cameras, got the film, got back in the vehicle, and got out of there as rapidly as possible. You can be in a pretty hot area if you're not in there very long.
What could the re-entry party see of the explosion's aftermath?
I remember crunching around on some melted trinitite. A lot of the greasewood was burned, and a lot of it was gone, of course, due to the blast and the thermal. Moonscape sort of appearance to me. Of course, the green glass was something no one had anticipated. This dark area, the glass-like material that the heat, the thermal radiation melted the top layer of sand on the desert here and formed a glass. And it has become known since then as trinitite.
After Trinity, Benjamin got leave from the Army.
And I went home to where my parents were in Duluth, Minnesota, and was there on the day that they announced the United States had dropped this huge atomic bomb on Hiroshima. I was able to say to my parents then, that's while they never knew what I was doing, and they had named Los Alamos in the newspaper, the secretive nature of the job was kind of over. 3 days later was Nagasaki on the 9th of August. Then a few days after that, we had VJ Day, Victory in Japan. So things moved rather rapidly after Trinity. We all felt very elated that we'd had something to do with a weapon that essentially ended the war. Of course, the fact that we had killed a couple 100,000 people or something on that order was a thing we didn't talk about very much. It wasn't talked about very much until quite a bit later. Of course, we had been attacked at Pearl Harbor. Lots of people killed, nothing like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the general attitude was, well, those guys started it and we finished it. That's still a good way to look at it, I think. Although one regrets the deaths of thousands of civilians.
2 years after graduating from college, after he got out of the military, Benjamin returned to work on nuclear tests, this time at Sandia Labs in Albuquerque.
It's been an exciting and interesting job all those years. It was a great career. I've told that story of Trinity a few times, and I can speak very freely now. There are not many left who were there.